Greetings everybody, thanks for clicking the link to watch this video. And this video, I'm Emmett Ferguson. I'm reading Think and Grow Rich, the original 1937 unedited text for men and women who resent poverty. And we're talking about the fear of criticism in the final chapter, The 6 Ghosts of Fear. Now before we get started in reading this book, I do want to share with you a great tool that if you ever read this book, that this tool will help you find riches faster, because what it is it is a workbook. Yes, a workbook. Now adults need workbooks too. They're not just for kids in school. Having a workbook one of the most important concepts in Think and Grow Rich is anything that you want, anything that you desire, you have to get that down on paper. You have to write it down. You have to set your plans into action. If you just keep them in your mind, they're either going to disappear for a little while, or they're just in your mind. They don't exist anywhere, and thus you're not doing anything with them. So with that, having a workbook where you can flip through and you just start writing and getting the ideas down. I mean, this is a very effective workbook too. It asks a lot of great questions. It puts a lot of the steps together, and it helps you get your mind thinking on the plans that you want to have. It's great to pair up with this, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So by the way, there's a link in the description below to purchase a copy of that workbook. And if you purchase a small copy, or if you purchase a copy from that, I get a small commission, and it helps me keep more of these videos going. Now with that said, we're going to go ahead and start on the chapter 15. And this is a section of the chapter about the fear of criticism. Grabbing my marker here. So, fear of criticism. This author, being neither a humorist nor a prophet, is inclined to attribute the basic fear of criticism to that part of a man's inherited nature, which prompts him not only to take away his fellow man's goods and wares, but to justify his action by criticism of his fellow man's character. It is a well-known fact that a thief will criticize the man from whom he steals, that politicians seek office not by displaying their own virtues and qualifications, but by attempting to besmirch their opponents. The fear of criticism takes on many forms, the majority of which are petty and trivial. Bald-headed men, for example, are bald for no other reason than their fear of criticism. Heads become bald because of the tight-fitting bands of hats, which cut off the circulation from the roots of the hair. Men wear hats not because they actually need them, but mainly because everyone is doing it. The individual falls in line and does likewise, lest some individuals criticize him. Women seldom have bald heads or even thin hair because they wear hats which fit their heads loosely, the only purpose of the hats being adornment. So, justify actions. So people are scared of criticism. It helps justify actions. Or even lack of actions. You criticize others, and politicians are criticized, or someone might just be afraid of what other people might say. But it must not be supposed that women are free from the fear of criticism. If any woman claims to be superior to man with reference to his fear, ask her to walk down the street wearing a hat of the vintage of 1890. The astute manufacturers of clothing have not been slow to capitalize this basic fear of criticism with which all mankind has been cursed. Every season, the styles and many articles of wearing apparel change. Who establishes the style? Certainly not the purchaser of clothing, but the manufacturer. Why does he change the style so often? The answer is obvious. He changes the style so he can sell more clothes. For the same reason, the manufacturers of automobiles, with a few rare and very sensible exceptions, change styles of models every season. No man wants to drive an automobile which is not of the latest style, although the older model may actually be the better car. And something that takes on the fear of criticism, new clothes, fashion. We have been describing the manner in which people behave under the influence of fear of criticism, as applied to the small and petty things of life. Let us now examine human behavior when this fear affects people in connection with the more important events of human relationship. Take, for example, practically any person who has reached the age of mental maturity, from 35 to 40 years of age as a general average, and if you could read the secret thoughts of his mind, you would find a very decided belief in most of the fables taught by the majority of the dogmatists and theologians a few decades back. Not often, however, will you find a person who has the courage to openly state his beliefs on this subject. Most people will, if pressed far enough, tell a lie rather than admit that they do not believe the stories associated with that form of religion which held people in bondage prior to the age of scientific discovery and education. Why does the average person, even in this day of enlightenment, shy away from denying his belief in the fables which were the basis of most of the religions a few decades ago? The answer is because of the fear of criticism. Men and women have been burned at the stake for daring to express disbelief in ghosts. It is no wonder we have inherited a consciousness which makes us fear criticism. The time was, and not so far in the past, when criticism carried severe punishments. It still does in some countries. So criticism, it's related to punishment, but ultimately not so bad. Although it used to be much worse back then. The fear of criticism robs man of his initiative, destroys his power of imagination, limits his individuality, takes away his self-reliance, and does him damage in 100 other ways. Parents often do their children irreparable injury by criticizing them. The mother of one of my boyhood chums used to punish him with a switch almost daily, always completing the job with the statement, "You'll land in a penitentiary before you were age 20. He was sent to a reformatory at the age of 17. Criticism is the one form of service of which everyone has too much. Everyone has a stock of it which is handed out, gratis, whether called on or not. Everyone has plenty. Everyone has plenty of criticism. One's nearest relatives often are the worst offenders. It should be recognized as a crime. In reality, it is a crime of the worst nature for any parent to build inferiority complexes in the mind of a child through unnecessary criticism. Employers who understand human nature get the best there is in men, not by criticism, but by constructive suggestion. Parents may accomplish the same results with their children. Criticism will plant fear in the human heart, or resentment, but it will not build love or affection. Crit builds fear. Fear. Arguments for crying for parents to build too much. Inferiority. Through criticism. Symptoms of the fear of criticism. The fear is almost as universal as the fear of poverty, and its effects are just as fatal to personal achievement, mainly because this fear destroys initiative and discourages the use of imagination. Destroy initiative, and discourages imagination. So, the major symptoms of the fear are self-consciousness, generally expressed through nervousness, timidity, in conversation and in meeting strangers, awkward movements of the hands and limbs, shifting of the eyes, lack of poise, expressed through lack of voice control, nervousness in the presence of others, poor posture of body, poor memory, personality, lacking in firmness of decision, personal charm, and ability to express opinions definitely, the habit of sidestepping issues instead of meeting them squarely, agreeing with others without careful examination of their opinions. Inferiority complex. The habit of expressing self-approval by word of mouth and by actions as a means of covering up a feeling of inferiority, using big words to impress others, often without knowing the real meaning of the words. Imitating others in dress, speech, and manners, boasting of imaginary achievements. This sometimes gives a surface appearance of a feeling of superiority. Extravagance. The habit of trying to keep up with the Joneses, spending beyond one's income. Lack of initiative. Failure to embrace opportunities for self-advancement, fear to express opinions, lack of confidence in one's own ideas, giving evasive answers to questions asked by superiors, hesitancy of manner and speech, deceit in both word and deeds, lack of ambition, mental and physical laziness, lack of self-assertion, slowness in reaching decisions, easily influenced by others, the habit of criticizing others behind their backs and flattering them to their faces, the habit of accepting defeat without protest, quitting an undertaking when opposed by others, suspicious of other people without cause, lacking in tactfulness of manner and speech, unwillingness to accept the blame for mistakes. The fear of ill health. This is a new section. This fear may be traced to both physical and social heredity. It is closely associated as to its origin with the causes of fear of old age and the fear of death, because it leads one closely to the border of terrible worlds of which man knows not, but concerning which he has been taught some discomforting stories. The opinion is somewhat general also that certain unethical people engaged in the business of selling health have had not a little to do with keeping alive the fear of health. In the main, man fears ill health because of terrible pictures which has been planted in his mind of what may happen if death should overtake him. He also fears it because of the economic toll which it may claim. Sellers of health sometimes want to keep you unhealthy, want you to fear it. A reputable physician estimated that 75% of all people who visit physicians for professional service are suffering with hypochondria, imaginary illness. It has been shown most convincingly that the fear of disease, even where there is not the slightest cause for fear, often produces the physical symptoms of the disease feared. Powerful and mighty is the human mind, it builds or it destroys. Playing upon this common weakness of fear of ill health, dispensers of patent medicines have reaped fortunes. This form of imposition upon credulous humanity became so prevalent some 20 years ago that Collier's Weekly magazine conducted a bitter campaign against some of the worst offenders in the patent medicine business. During the flu epidemic, which broke out during the World War, the mayor of New York City took drastic steps to check the damage which people were doing themselves through their inherent fear of ill health. He called in the newspapermen and said to them, "Gentlemen, I feel it necessary to ask you not to publish any scare headlines concerning the flu epidemic. Unless you cooperate with me, we will have a situation which we cannot control." The newspapers quit publishing stories about the flu, and within 1 month the epidemic had been successfully checked. Through a series of experiments conducted some years ago, it was proved that people may be made ill by suggestion. We conducted this experiment, so suggestion, hypochondria. We conducted this experiment by causing 3 acquaintances to visit the victims, each of whom asked the question, "What ails you? You look terribly ill." The first questioner usually provoked a grin and a nonchalant, "Oh, nothing, I'm alright," from the victim. The second questioner usually was answered with the statement, "I don't know exactly, but I do feel badly." The third questioner was usually met with the frank admission that the victim was actually feeling ill. Try this on an acquaintance if you doubt that it will make him feel uncomfortable, but do not carry the experiment too far. There is a certain religious sect whose members take vengeance upon their enemies by the hexing method. They call it placing a spell on the victim. There's overwhelming evidence that disease sometimes begins in the form of negative thought impulse. Such an impulse may be passed from one mind to another by suggestion or created by an individual in his own mind. A man who is blessed with more wisdom than this incident might indicate once said, "When anyone asks me how I feel, I always want to answer by knocking him down." Doctors send patients into new climates for their health because a change of mental attitude is necessary. The seed of fear of ill health lives in every human mind. Worry, fear, discouragement, disappointment in love and business affairs cause this seed to germinate and grow. The recent business depression kept the doctors on the run because every form of negative thinking may cause ill health. So the fear of ill health, it can be caused by, the mind, negative thinking. Disappointments in business and in love stand at the head of the list of causes of fear of ill health. A young man suffered a disappointment in love which sent him to a hospital. For months he hovered between life and death. A specialist in suggestive therapeutics was called in. The specialist changed nurses, placing him in charge of a very charming young woman who began, by prearrangement with the doctor, to make love to him the first day of her arrival on the job. Within 3 weeks, the patient was discharged from the hospital, still suffering, but with an entirely different malady. He was in love again. The remedy was a hoax, but the patient and the nurse were later married. Both are in good health at the time of this writing. Symptoms of the fear of ill health. The symptoms of this almost universal fear are autosuggestion. Symptoms. So we're going to put the symptoms right here. Autosuggestion. The habit of negative use of self-suggestion by looking for and expecting to find the symptoms of all kinds of disease, enjoying imaginary illness and speaking of it as being real. The habit of trying all fads and isms recommended by others as having therapeutic value. Talking to others of operations, accidents, and other forms of illness. Experimenting with diets, physical exercises, reducing systems without professional guidance. Trying home remedies, patent medicines, and quick quack remedies. So this is negative autosuggestion. Hypochondria, the habit of talking of illness, concentrating the mind upon disease, and expecting its appearance until a nervous break occurs. Nothing that comes in bottles can cure this condition. It is brought on by negative thinking, and nothing but positive thought can effect a cure. Hypochondria, a medical term for imaginary disease, is said to do as much damage on occasion as the disease one fears might do. Most so-called cases of nerves come from imaginary illness. So hypochondria, and then there's exercise. Fear of ill health often interferes with proper physical exercise and results in overweight by causing one to avoid outdoor life. Susceptibility. Fear of ill health breaks down nature's body resistance and creates a favorable condition for any form of disease one may contact. The fear of ill health often is related to the fear of poverty, especially in the case of the hypochondriac, who constantly worries about the possibility of having to pay doctor bills, hospital bills. This type of person spends much time preparing for sickness, talking about death, saving money for cemetery lots and burial expenses. Self-coddling, the habit of making a bid for sympathy. Bid sympathy. Using imaginary illness as the lure, people often resort to this trick to avoid work. The habit of feigning illness to cover plain laziness or to serve as an alibi for lack of ambition. The habit of using alcohol or narcotics to destroy pains as headaches, neuralgia, instead of eliminating the cause. The habit of reading about illness and worrying over the possibility of being stricken by it. The habit of reading patent medicine advertisements. And the next fear is the fear of loss of love. The original source of this inherent fear needs but little description, because it obviously grew out of man's polygamous habit of stealing his fellow man's mate, and his habit of taking liberties with her whenever he could. Jealousy and other similar forms of dementia praecox grew out of men's inherited fear of the loss of love of someone. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears, as it often leads to permanent insanity. The fear of the loss of love probably dates back to the Stone Age, when men stole women by brute force. They continue to steal females, but their technique has changed. Instead of force, they now use persuasion, the promise of pretty clothes, motor cars, and other bait, much more effective than physical force. Man's habits are the same as they were at the dawn of civilization, but he expresses them differently. Careful analysis has shown that women are more susceptible to this fear than men. This fact is easily explained. Women have learned from experience that men are polygamous by nature, that they are not to be trusted in the hands of rivals. So fear of loss of love, the reason, claims nature, polygamy. Symptoms of the fear of loss of love. The distinguishing symptoms of this fear are jealousy, the habit of being suspicious of friends and loved ones without any reasonable evidence of sufficient grounds. Jealousy is a form of dementia praecox which sometimes becomes violent without the slightest cause. The habit of accusing wife or husband of infidelity without grounds. General suspicion of everyone, absolute faith in no one, then is fault finding. The habit of finding fault with friends, relatives, business associates, and loved ones upon the slightest provocation or without any cause whatsoever. Gambling, the habit of gambling, stealing, cheating, and otherwise taking hazardous chances to provide money for loved ones with the belief that love can be bought. The habit of spending beyond one's means or incurring debts to provide gifts for loved ones with the object of making a favorable showing. Insomnia, nervousness, lack of persistence, weakness of will, lack of control, lack of self-reliance, bad temper. So with that, it was fault finding and gambling. So we're going to go ahead and review this section of the chapter, and we went through 3 of the 6 major fears. We started with the fear of criticism. Now, the fear of criticism, it's pretty obvious that fear of criticism can lead to poverty. If you're scared of what other people are going to say to you, say about you, that's going to affect you because you're going to use it to justify your actions. Your fear of criticism is going to help you come up with all sorts of justifications on why you can't do something. Because you are more scared of being criticized by somebody, that you're going to come up with all sorts of reasons saying, oh, I can't do this because, I'm not capable. I don't have the skill. It's not going to be to perfection. And those are all just excuses. Those are all just excuses because you're fearing criticism. And how this happens, fear of criticism happens because, you want all, or just demonstrations of fear of criticism. Every time you get a new clothes or new fashion to stay up with the times, these are all just demonstrations that you're scared of, or that you fear what other people might say about an older fashion. So there's the criticism, and part of it, back in the day, there was really no criticism. They would literally just punish you if you did something wrong. If people thought you were a witch and you didn't go against it, then everyone has plenty of criticism. That's the other major thing is not everyone is free from the fear of criticism, but everybody has criticism, including myself, including the reader of this. And criticism builds fear. And he even argues that's a crime for parents to build an inferiority complex in children, you know, and that happens through criticism because children begin to start thinking that they need to justify all their actions and, you know, stay up and become superior. So here are just some of the things that destroys initiative, discourages imagination, makes you self-conscious. You have a lack of poise when you fear criticism because, you know, of how other people might perceive you. You have a personality issues. You're not going to be as confident and as, you know, charming as you possibly could be. You have that inferiority complex when you're fearing criticism. You always have to seem superior. And there's extravagance, lack of initiative, lack of ambition, and these are all symptoms that you have that, you know, you're not taking enough action because of a fear of criticism. Next, there was the fear of ill health. I think this is a very interesting one because this is one where your mind really can influence it tremendously, even though you don't really think so. You know, you think it's physical and you think, you know, things happen to me, but really sometimes things can happen and then you overthink it and you think it, and then it happens to you. And, you know, people that sell health products, people that sell medications, sometimes they want you to stay unhealthy. I mean, that is still true today, and pharmaceutical companies, you know, if everybody was healthy, they would have no more people to sell to, right? So you've got that. And then he talks about the power of suggestion and hypochondria. Some people are very susceptible to suggestion from others. You know, some people can believe that they've got some chronic illness simply because someone that they lived with asked them about it. You know, don't let that be you, and recognize, you know, when you're being a little bit too suggestive to other people, because it is powerful, and this is a power that you have to manage properly. So some of the mentions that the symptoms include negative autosuggestion, because autosuggestion is powerful when you tell yourself things, but you're using negative autosuggestion to tell yourself things that, you know, that are going to hurt you. And hypochondria, you know, is a fear of illness. Exercise, you stop exercising, you become susceptible to more things, and, you know, you coddle yourself and you try to get other people to feel bad for you, and sympathy and, you know, intemperance, not managing yourself. Then there was the fear of loss of love. You know, it affects everybody. People want to have love and they're scared to lose it. And he talks about the nature of polygamy. I think this is a bit of a topic that might not be as well accepted and received today, but, you know, I'm sure there are still some people that would argue that it is true that, you know, men just have a different nature. And the fear comes from the fact that, you know, people compete over men and women, and that competition leads to a fear of loss of love, and that can create a lot of emotion, which can have huge issues. Like jealousy combined with a knife is not very conducive. You'll find fault in others, you know, and you think gambling is going to help you find love because you think that you're going to get that money or something. So those are some of the ideas that have been talked about with these fears, and it's important to manage your fears. And, you know, he talks about fear of ill health. Yeah, you don't want to have health, so, you know, it's reasonable to be scared of it, but, you know, don't be too suggestive. Don't spend all your time focusing on how scared you are of ill health. Spend all your time focused on, you know, how scary criticism might be. Don't spend all your time focusing on the fear of the loss of love. That, you know, that's what consumes your mind, that fear, and, you know, that's where your mind is going to be attracting. So with that said, thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for the last. We're near the end of the Think and Grow Rich. And before you leave, go ahead and check out the links in the description below to order copies of these two wonderful books. One is Think and Grow Rich, the original 1937 under text, and the other is Think and Grow Rich workbook that you can accompany this and you can really start putting your dreams and your goals and your desires onto paper, because that is such an effective and important step in when you want to achieve something. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and sign out of this video. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and share and subscribe, and have a very successful day.